clearly isn't enough for the kind of conversations you and I have to have for the afternoon.
Literally, we could have sat here, we could literally sit here for hours, right? But what I'm going to do is, like, final 5-10 minutes, just kind of, let's round up where we were. But, you know, you was making such a great point about being, you know, working in an environment. So please, let's go back to that.
So like I was saying to you with regards to the question you were pointing to me about how does all of these experiences and perspectives I carry influence my kind of leadership, and rightfully so is like I said to you, being that I'm a daughter of a lion, I'm a very, very strong leader. But I lead with feminist principles. So I subscribe to feminist leadership, which then requires of me to continuously be as consultative as possible, to be as respectful of others' contribution. And what I've always even said to my own team is that I know that I lead leaders. I'm not leading followers. So when you come with that kind of perspective, it gives you the humility to understand that everyone who is around the table in an organization is a leader in and of themselves, and you ought to offer them the respect that you would want your own leadership to actually be offered. So in that regard, I'm a person who believes in raising spaces that are very diverse. Obviously, as a trans person, I could not work in an organization that is trans exclusionary. So I continuously craft my teams and the work that we do to be celebratory of diversity and to be as inclusive as possible on various levels, not just on sexual orientation or gender identity, but racial-wise, ethnicity-wise, geographically-wise, insofar as the placing of the rest of my team from across different parts of the continent and even the globe. So I lead with a consciousness that many other, I would say, patriarchal or most men do not walk with that kind of consciousness. Many other persons that I've seen walk with the belief that I know it all and everybody else ought to follow my lead. So I don't work in that manner. But at the same time, I work in an environment where I'm young and I'm continuously faced with very ageist kind of attitudes where I've experienced a disrespect of my leadership based on the fact that I happen to be one of the youngest people on my team, and age does not necessarily be a qualifier of wisdom. It's not a qualifier of experience. It's not a qualifier of ability. So I continuously have to push back at spaces where immediately you identify, or it gets identified that you are young, especially that I'm a person who was raised by a woman who's proud of her age, and I likewise am proud of my age. I'm 32, I'll be 33 in October of this year. But I do not appreciate where that age tends to be used as a way of disqualifying, discrediting, and disrespecting my leadership. I stomp out those level of disrespect and ageist attitude. And then on a second level, I'm a fashion designer. I love to look good. I believe that when you look good, you feel good, and then you do good. So it's this little triangle for me that works to make sure that when I go for a presentation, when I go for a meeting, when I go for an interview, I put my best foot forward. So I'm always looking amazing for me to feel good about myself in order for me to do very good. But you find that looking good at times can be used by masculine persons and by men as a way of thinking that that's an invitation for them to have to pursue you, to have to make sexual advances at you. And I push back hard against that. And I've had very bad experiences, that one of them just some few months ago, where actually two experiences in the year of 2019. One where I was in a meeting somewhere of the African Union Commission as we were launching and signing into effect the accountability framework. And somebody who's coming from the developmental sector, who worked for the African Development Bank at the time, having made a beautiful presentation, comes to me, and my thinking is that this person wants to get more of dialogue on the matter and the kind of content that I delivered. Instead, the individual wanted to make it in such a way that if he got time with me, then my organization would be able to get funding. Did not subscribe to giving sex favors in order to get funding. All of organizations led, I do not do that. So one, that was the most brutal experience of my life, of realizing that women in all of our diversity who are leaders are forever at the mercy of a system that wants to delegitimize our leadership by sexual means, where men want to, let's put her in her place. So if I sleep with her, then tomorrow I can tell people that, hey, I did that, I tapped that, and I don't do that, Nims. That's one because that I carry insofar as the organizations that I've been in. I do not play in the spaces where I work. Simple as that. Since I've been the person that I am, I play as far away as possible from the spaces that I work, because I respect people that I work with, and I likewise want them to be able to respect me. But move forward. I wrote, I have a column on the Botswana Gazette called Queer Eye. So I wrote about that experience with this guy from the African Development Bank. I chose not to report him because I reprimanded him directly and told him that I'm not that kind of a girl. And if at all, this is how he actually gets sexual favors from people in our sector. And I have heard of these stories where people offer sexual favor to get funding. I don't do that. I don't subscribe to that kind of fundraising. I don't do sex fundraising. Sex work is sex work, and I respect it, but it's not the work that I do. So for me, I absolutely do not sell sexual favor in order for me to get funding for organizations I work in. And if somebody who is a man can walk away and say, who does she think she is, because I didn't get to give him anything to tap, I'm very proud. That's when I'm very proud. And then I happen to have another experience of sexual harassment as well within my own organization, with somebody that I used to work with me at Accountability International, who we've had to let go of, whom since the beginning of my tenure as the executive director had been making all these sexual connotations in the ways in which he would respond to me. I mean, if I make it a little example, it would be something along the lines of, during lunch, the team and I can go out together. We work in Cape Town, in the heart of the CBD, in the City Bowl. So we can walk out and just jump onto Long Street and have something to eat. And he would be saying as they're leaving, Ricky, are you coming? We're going to go grab lunch. And I'm like, I'm coming. And then he'll go like, coming. With the sexual connotation of what coming in the sexual context means, climaxing or having an orgasm. And you work in an environment where at times I realize that many people do not even pick out those kind of subtle microaggressions where somebody is making these kind of sexual advances or remarks at you that he would not make with anybody else. So I didn't notice how any other person would not be able to pick out that this person was actually a sexual harasser and a sexual predator in the work environment. Another experience was where I came into the office. If you checked some of my old pictures, some other pictures of mine, I was wearing a nice shift dress that's figure hugging, but still as a formal dress that is knee length, and it fits me beautifully. And I was looking good because I was going to do an interview on that day after work. And I come into the office and other people are saying, oh, Madam Director, you look amazing today. What is the occasion? And I tell them, this is what I'm going to be doing today. Thank you so much. Hey, well, at the back of my mind, I'm like, yes, I know I look good because I came looking good because I need to do good. That's my mantra. And this makes a statement like, you really look good if you weren't my boss. If I weren't your boss, what would happen? What is it that you would do if I weren't your boss, looking the way that I'm looking? You would literally jump on me. You would move all these things on top of desks and hump me. Yeah. And funny enough, I immediately with that one reported it to the other directors, because I have two directors that report directly to me. As the other one is the director of research and resourcing, another director of finance and ops. So I'm the executive director they report to. So I reported the matter to them and I said to them, I don't want to act on it, because for me, I feel, knowing fully as a young woman who's a leader, that at all times when we report sexual harassment in the workplace, we are verified as having invited those kind of advances.
Yeah, what did
Somebody
you
said,
do?
men have up.
Maybe
No,
you
it was
should
just
have dressed.
no.
Maybe
You
you should
cannot.
you should have worn that kind of lipstick.
Exactly. You shouldn't want that dress. What did you think? No, I'm not dressing for you. I don't dress for a man. Not even the man that I'm married to do I dress for him. I dress beautifully and he compliments me because he's also a fashion designer. But I don't dress for another person. I dress for me, for the occasion that I'm going to, because I want to feel good to any place that I go to. But this guy then made that statement, and then I got it reported, and I said to them, don't act on it, saying to the director of finance and operations, because he's the head of HR. And I said to him, I just want you to go on record so that then tomorrow, if this person's behavior persists, I can be able to say, this has been a trail of behavior that has been unwarranted, unwanted, and unappreciated in the workspace. Months later, I decided that, okay, look, let's do a sexual harassment training for the team. And then we had this online training that everybody had to subscribe to. And he also had to subscribe. And he was one of the first person to say, hey, I've subscribed. I'm going to be doing the training, yada, 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 yada. Now comes a meeting that we're having in November of last year, and it's a high-level meeting in which we had President Kgalema Motlanthe, who is the former president of South Africa, doing our keynote address. So we had a meeting in the day, and wonderful high-level meeting, launching and continental campaign, challenging criminalization in Africa. In the evening, we have now a cocktail reception, and this guy names now goes on to level 3, level 4, and 5, and even 6, where I could not now continue to ignore what this person's thinking and perception of me is inside of his mind, as I'm supposed to be his director. Ideally, I'm supposed to be his boss, but I don't carry myself with this thing of I'm your boss. I don't. I'm a leader, and I lead other leaders, and I believe that leaders ought to know better. We talking with other people. It's a cocktail, sitting on high bar tables, and it's a bit communicative. People are talking, it's loudish, they sound. And at some point he comes towards me and holds me, grabbing me onto him, and his face is right in front of me. So I'm moving back as I'm sitting on a stool to show him that, can you kind of keep a bit of a distance? Yes, respect my face. And even one of my directors says to him, hey, can you not see that you're making her uncomfortable? Can you stop holding her that way? No, the dude does not listen. He comes forward to me, so I turn my face in order to give him my left ear, and instead he then pulls back and he's like, oh, you don't want to kiss me now because there are people around. And I'm like, you should I be kissing you? Why should I be kissing you in front of people? Now here is the backstory, Nims. The team and I have had, which is an environment that I walked into, is that when we meet each other, hi darling, and we hug each other. Purely a non-sexual kind of kiss on the lip or perk. And that's exactly what I found as an organizational way of just creating a very comfortable and friendly environment. So in all other respect, if I had not seen him and any other member of my team, because we travel quite a lot, and I have not seen them in a while, we will kiss and then we hug. Simple as that.
Yes.
But on this very day, what becomes peculiar to me is the insistence that I don't want to kiss him in an event, 1. 2, in the evening, when I have spent the whole entire day with this person in a high-level meeting, which for me was another gaslighting tactic of trying to make me feel as if I was in the wrong because I didn't want to kiss him the way people. No, none of my kisses to my team members have ever been done in secrecy, and they always happen where there's other people who are witness and testimony to the fact that they are not sexual. So he now puts it on me to make it seem as if I am the one who is being a problem. So making it look to anybody who was in that space at the table that we were at seem as if I was doing something wrong and that I didn't want to kiss him, as if any other day I would kiss him without any other person in place, which for me is another tactic of a manipulative psychopath and work bully who want to make you feel guilty and as if you have wronged them. When in all fact, he had wronged me, he had insulted me, he had disrespected me, wanting to kiss me. Clearly, he was the one who wanted to kiss me when I thought he wanted to say something. So I moved away from this table and I'm at another table talking to other people. And then some other trans colleagues come and they said, let's take a picture. So we're holding this social media frame. And as we're holding it, I'm sitting on a stool again at this point and others are standing. This guy, Nims, comes across where we were seated and then comes directly to us, holds this social media frame at the top and starts grinding and humping in a very sexual manner against me. The person who that social media frame was sitting on was me, on my knee, and of which he literally stood right at me and not at any other person. And he's busy humping and grinding against me, and I was livid, Nims. That's the most invasive thing that for me has happened to me in a workspace, particularly where I happen to be a leader. And it was painful. It still is to this day. I'm glad at the fact that I've been able to heal from it and come to terms with the fact that it has no bearing on who I am as a person, or as a leader, but on the person and how he does not know how to respect boundaries and how he does not have any kind of self-control, let alone the kind of leader that he is, if at all I can consider him to be. And it's those kind of experiences for me, being a woman who is in leadership, that continuously have affirmed to me why I need to continuously keep a clear distinction between my personal space and my workspace, because other people, particularly men, do not find that space easy for them to be able to draw a line on, because clearly this guy has had an attraction towards me that I knew about, and he was acting on it because he had thought that because I've not said no explicitly to him, then somehow that can be converted into a yes, which it isn't. Because I have wanted by all means to show him that, hey, you ought to respect my personal space, which I did even on that night of November 5th, but he still could not respect it, even to the point where, Nims, we had the arbitration of this process, because I had reported that incident to the HR director, and there was a whole entire internal process of dealing with it, and I'm glad that Accountability International really lived to its mantra of being an accountable leader within the developmental and human rights sector, because they really dealt with the matter in the most satisfactory way for me, where they immediately notified him of this complaint. He was immediately put on suspension, and immediately an investigation ensued that culminated in a hearing to that effect. Although the conclusion wasn't as satisfactory as I had wanted, because his contract was coming to an end at the end of December of last year, conveniently for him. So at the time where then the arbitration is set to happen, which was the 10th of December, that was right at the very end of the year, which meant that the commissioner at the CCMA, which is the body that arbitrates on these kind of employer-employee conflictual situations, was not going to be able to continue hearing the matter beyond that date, because they wouldn't date in 2019, and he would no longer be on the employer of the organization. So he was led to just leave the organization on the premise that his contract has ended and it's not being renewed, which, yes, he got away scot-free without, which for me, ideally, I would have firstly wanted an apology from him. He never offered me one. Instead, in the whole entire process, him and his lawyer were trying to create a picture that I have created an environment in the workplace where people did not understand what the boundaries. And somehow, by being able to kiss on the lip to say hi, this should be misconstrued to being that I invite you to be sexual with me, which is utter nonsense, because why is it that no other member of my team has that kind of connotation? None of my other team members have ever sexually harassed me. Why him? Why him alone? And it tells you to the extent at which abusers, violators, sexual harassers, rapists will forever create, and the system actually is designed to help them be able to victim blame. And I refused for it to continue being the case, to the point where I had to communicate back to my team that this is actually what happened, where there are even photos taken on that evening as he was busy humping and grinding against me, as a way of being able to at least consciously conclude for myself and get the closure I needed, that at least there is the evidence that this is what this guy did to me. How about another woman, Nims, who does not have photos?
I was just going to say that. What about someone who isn't
of you as this person, where there's no witness to corroborate what they're experiencing?
Like, there are people that, like you said, in the flip side, you said that there was, well, if you do this, we can give you funding. There are those people who will hold that over you and make you feel as if, well, you definitely can't say anything because you need this job.
You need this job. I've got your whole life in my hands.
Yeah, and so it's. I just think we need more people to speak up and speak about stories. So I was around when this last incident happened. And
I remember it was that very week when you and came into Joburg as we were doing the second interviews for Real Queers.
And I remember what it was like, and it was traumatic. And even for me, I didn't experience it. I wasn't there. I didn't experience it, but yet I still felt it. I felt it because I could relate to times where people have used their dominance over me or tried to, and I trust me, after this,
using money for sextortion, because that's what in the first experience that I had with the guy from the African Development Bank, what it was. And I can only imagine that if I were any other person, perhaps coming from a smaller organization which is struggling and really in need of funding, probably this guy, I'm not his first victim. He's been doing this, and people have been falling into it because in the moment of desperation where international donor funding is waning in Africa, he clearly has done this with other activists in the movement, where he dangles money and funding in front of them in order to be able to sexually exploit them. And that's exactly what the kind of precarious position as women we often find ourselves in, that at times we understand that we've got, yes, the power to say yes and to say no, but in instances where you are in dire need for funding, where your organization is facing you're going to end up falling into that trap. And I was cushioned by the fact that I work for an organization that I'm not in any desperate position to desperately fall for those kind of sextortive attitudes of men. But I'm sure that many of us do fall into those kind of traps where money is dangled in front of us and we end up doing sexual activities that we don't consent to in the ideal way, where consent cannot be influenced by anything that is external, that it comes from within, that you want out of your own volition.
That's another topic. You're just giving us a whole new topic to talk about. I think we need to have a discussion on consent.
I definitely want to explain, and I think that's why I wanted to also have this conversation, because sexual harassment leaves a lot of us who are the survivors of it, and even sexual violence in its entirety, with this self-blame and with the guilt that we carry and the shame as well, that it's as if we warranted what has happened to us. And I think it takes more and more of us talking about it, Nims, for us to be able to open up the floodgates so that then other women can also stand up, as the Me Too movement was intended to do, to say, hey, this happened to me, can it not be another woman who says Me Too? We ought to cut the chain and we ought to stop it, so that then no more women, no more queer folk have to stand up and say Me Too. In the ideal world, we're not seeing men standing up and saying Me Too, because they don't get harassed, they don't get violated, they don't get assaulted in the ways that we do. And in order to be able to heal other survivors, we ought to give them the platform to it's okay for you to stand up and say, hey, this actually happened to me and this is not right. Because the funny and the most fucked up part, I'm sorry to use that kind of profanity, about this situation is that it's always the most charismatic of men, the most loved of men, the most respected of men, the most intelligent of men, who end up doing these kind of violent acts towards us, of which you often find that as a survivor, you are standing here with the fear that if I talk and tell people that Bob Munyati actually sexually harassed me at Accountability International, what will happen? What will people say? Will they believe me, or are they going to stand? Yeah. And I experienced that, Nims, because there were certain people that, when they got to find out about this case, did not believe me. Even that we believe her movement, I got to realize that we believe her when the perpetrator is somebody that is far distant from us, when it's somebody that we do not know. Your buddy that you go to lunch with, then you start getting troubled as to where do you draw the line to say that we stand with the survivor, we stand with the victim, we believe her. And I got to experience that the hard way, that not everybody is going to stand up and say we believe you, because of their close proximity to that other person who's the perpetrator. And I still live with that and the ramifications of that to this point. But I've seen that you do not need for people to believe you for you to legitimately have experienced what you experienced. If you experience, honey, and speak about it and boldly claim back your power from the person who's trying to rob you, because they have created this environment as a way to cushion themselves, a social net for themselves that will carry them when they fall from grace. So step away from thinking that that net is meant to carry us and catch us as survivors. It is not meant for us, my darling. That is something I want to tell anybody. But for us to claim back our power is to talk about this. It's to be able to
why we have you here today.
We need to call out the people who hurt us, and we name them so that then another woman in another organization, should they go and work with Bob Munyati, for instance, they can be able to know that that person actually is a sexual harasser. So be on the lookout in terms of how you engage with them and work with them, knowing that they are not necessarily the most woman-friendly or queer-friendly of persons. And that's how we claim back our power, and that's the only closure that for me I've been able to get of the fact that I stood up strong, and I faced my bed, and I said to them that what you are doing is not right. And I don't tolerate it, and I don't respect it. And thank goodness I work for an organization that's very accountable, that made it a clear line that when you are accused of sexual harassment, we don't even need to listen to whether you will justify yourself or not, because many a times we entertain nonsense from harassers and abusers, all in the name of wanting to offer them a platform to speak for themselves. No, you ought to know how to respect boundaries in the workplace such that you can never find yourself in a position where somebody lays a sexual harassment claim against you. And with that, for me, that's the kind of closure I got of the fact that I had protection from the workspace that I work in. And I had made it very clear, Nims, even when I reported the matter, that if my organization does not handle this matter the right way, I will resign with immediate effect and I will walk away.
I'm glad they valued their ethos. I'm glad they valued you as a person, as a female. They valued you enough to actually take, do you know what I mean? And actually be accountable for this.
Absolutely.
And I think, again, that is amazing, guys. Make sure you guys watch the beginning part of this conversation so you guys can pick up on all the bits that you guys have missed. It's the second half of the conversation. I am very weary about time. So can I just ask you, Ricky, right?
Yep.
Right. What are your 3 tips, right, for keeping your mental health positive and for keeping sane during this time of Corona? 3 top tips.
Yep. 1, find those things that you can be able to do that make you happy. We need to get out of the daily grind of that. It's just about what I do for others and what I produce and what I give out. Give to the self. Do things that you love doing, be it cooking and experimenting. I've been seeing other people who their social media feeds are just full of food and experimentation. Do those things that make you happy. For me, one of them is fashion. I love to design. So Tony and I currently are working on an amazing collection that is going to be coming out and shown at the end after we come out of lockdown. I do love to also binge on some nice series that, for me, very strong, powerful women leaders and women actors. I absolutely love to see women in control and in charge. So those are some of the things that also give back to me. A second thing is to continuously keep my spirituality in check. I need to continuously feed my spirit. I need to continuously feed this inner child. And how I do that is by writing. I do have, I'm working on my manuscript for my maiden autobiography. So every single time I'm interested in just feeding this child, I go and put my own thoughts into a chapter that I'm working on, which continuously feeds my understanding of the self, and also then gives me the kind of pat in the back to say, girl, you've come far, you've done what.
Yeah.
And then thirdly, I enjoy music. So do not take yourself too seriously at times. Get silly. Put on some music, dance around in your house. Like, that's one of the things I really enjoy. I love music and I love to dance. So once in a day, we just, in the middle of the day, we will play our music. I love more especially Trace Africa and just listen to what is recent and current insofar as African music, and just grind a little bit.
My neighbours report me, right, and say that something new is going on inside of her house, right? Because I'm randomly going to start playing music.
You will be surprised. surprised. They might be enjoying hearing your amazing sounds in your house and jamming to you. No. I think that is absolutely fantastic. Just play some music, enjoy some music, dance a little bit, and just give yourself some bit of energy. You can imagine all those endorphins and oxytocin running in your system. It does good for you and for your mental agility to be able to go the distance in this time. So let us not sit on just lamenting about COVID-19, but continuously also introspect about our lives in general. I've been having different conversations like the one I've had with you. I had another one last week with GD Live on Instagram as well, of just continuously taking those little bits of gains out of the time that we've been forced to be in our solitude. And I know that I speak from a privileged position because not everybody has a home for them to self-isolate to. But for those that are able to, or in any space that you happen to be housed and sheltered in, take time to really take stock of your life, because when we come out of these various lockdowns and this COVID-19 period, life cannot return to normal. There is no normal after this. So what is your new norm? What are the new positives that you take with you into this life? And start plotting those little, I think, dots that you're going to be connecting as you come out of this period. I think for me, that's been really great. Reassessing my own work life, reassessing. I know for sure coming out of this lockdown period, which was a decision I had taken at the beginning of the year, I will not be traveling as much as I've been traveling the past 5 years of my work life. I've made it clear to the organization that I'm, one, reducing my flight time for my own well-being, but as well to be much more accountable, to be more accountable to the environment and the ecosystem we live in, because we leave quite a lot of carbon footprint around. And it's those kind of things that I'm introspecting on in this time of just really sitting and not being able to do what has been the norm, because the norm has just been about wake up, go do what you need to do in life. Come back, sleep, wake up, go do the same. But understanding that you need to be deliberate about giving yourself this time that Corona has given us to take a proper break. And those are the things that I'm going to be doing. We have a pending trip with my girlfriends to Rio and to Buenos Aires, which are scheduled for September. We're not sure if we're still going to be doing it in September. But it's those kind of things that for me, I've made sure that are going to be a much more deliberate effort for myself to give myself time away. Exactly. And I would implore on everybody to use this time to be able to do that. And that's how I'm keeping sane really through this time.
Ricky, it has been amazing. I'm going to follow your tips though, right? It's been amazing talking with you, and we're going to jump and talk privately after this.
It's been an honor.
It has. It's been an honor. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely.
Go spam Ricky's page, okay? Go and spam Ricky's page. Go and find out. Go and see. Go and just trust me. It's worth the look, right? It's worth the look.
Absolutely.
Ricky,
and I look forward to other conversations we'll have in future. So definitely shout at me. I definitely am interested to have a much more focused conversation just on creating safe environment, working environment and working spaces for queer persons and for women and for young persons, because it's something that I'm very deliberate about how I am continuously leading the organizations and spaces that I happen to work in, because guys, we take for granted how vulnerable we are as women, as queer folk, as young persons in the different spaces that we work in. And we ought to put it out there as pointers for others to be able to learn to do better and to protect themselves, and how to report such matters and how to heal from these kind of experiences. So I look forward to even a further conversation dedicated to that very topic.
100%, 100%. Ricky, it's been a pleasure, as always.
Thank you so much. And to the Real Queers TV team, please give so much love for me. Thank you for this platform. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.